What is known? That is the question that brings us here today. And that is the big question that, motivates all of the videos and all of the podcasts and all of the things that I write. What is known? What can be known? It seems like a very simple question, but truly, I don't think it is. Knowledge is not a very simple thing to describe. We can look at knowledge as a feeling of understanding, a feeling of knowing, a feeling of certainty. But does that actually convey any knowledge? I certainly don't think so. A feeling of knowledge is just a feeling like any other feeling. It means that we feel it, much like we could feel warm or cold or sad. But that doesn't really mean anything about the underlying nature of whatever we feel that we know. So what do we exactly know? What can be known? Here I like to divide the problem into what I call the layers of knowledge. In layer 0, we assume absolutely nothing. We trust nothing. We don't trust reason. We don't trust our senses. Honestly, it's the blank slate of knowledge. And the thing is, what can we find here and what can we know here? Not much. Honestly, very likely, absolutely nothing. You see, if we don't trust reason or logic, there's not much we can build. If we don't trust our senses, there's not much that we can assume from just looking at them. There's not much we can assume just from perceiving things, because we honestly don't trust those things. And if we don't have reason, if we don't have logic, and honestly, why do we need to innately trust reason and logic? We don't. We choose to, mostly because if we don't, we're stuck here in layer 0 and there's not much we can do, but there is no reason why we need to trust logic and reason. There's no reason we need to trust reason. And if we don't, we're just here stuck in this layer 0. And that's not a simple thing. And that's not a meaningless thing. So we are stuck here in layer 0, and there's not really much we can do about it. If we want to get unstuck, if we want to start doing things, if we want to start rationalizing and thinking and creating knowledge, we need to assume that we can trust at least reason and logic. But that is a jump that we're crafting out of thin air. That's just like imagining a stamp saying we trust this and stamping it on reason and logic without any proper true meaning behind this trusting. It's just something that we're assuming. It's just, okay, we're gonna take this thing, we're gonna really trust it, and then we're gonna build all of the other things atop of it. This thing is floating on thin air, and it's the only way for us to get to what I like to call layer 1. And in layer 1, we trust reason and logic. And we say, this thing here, we really can use it to start building knowledge. And when we start using reason and logic to build knowledge, now we can create some things. Now we can create some knowledge. At least we can go for the good old cogito ergo sum, or some modified version of it where we say, we perceive things. There are things in this conscious field that we call ourselves. And since there are things, we at least can conclude that things exist. And depending on the definition of us and what we are, we exist. At least we exist as things in the conscious field, things in the conscious place that we inhabit or that we are. That's already something. But bear in mind that we're using reason and logic to create this knowledge, and we can build many other things on top of it, but we are using something that we defined as trustworthy. These things are not inherently trustworthy. If we go back to layer 0, we still don't have any way to climb out of it or to create a ladder that will allow us to reach layer 1. We just said, well, I don't care, I need to escape it, and created out of thin air the tools that granted us the capability of being here in layer 1. There are other layers, and especially, for example, in layer 1, we still don't trust our senses. As I define layer 1, we trust reason and logic, but we still don't trust the senses to actually mean anything or to represent anything beyond just being things in the conscious field. Because in the layer that we normally inhabit, which I call layer 2, we trust that our senses, sight, smells, and hearing, we are perceiving things that represent something other than the perceptions themselves. And what do I mean by this? I know it's confusing, but I mean that when we see something, we believe that the thing that we are seeing represents something else beyond the thing we are seeing itself, meaning the conscious perception of seeing something. Let's say we see a red ball. When we see a red ball, we actually think that there is a red ball that we are seeing. But this is also something that we are trusting. In layer 1, even if we see a red ball, all we can say is there are perceptions of a red ball. There is a conscious image of a red ball that it's permeating my conscious field. But I can't really know if this is because there is actually a red ball that for some reason I am perceiving, and normally we say because photons are touching the red ball, touching our eyes, and the eyes are transforming those photons that are touching them into images in our brain that we then consciously perceive. But we don't know any of this. We need to trust that the things that we are seeing or perceiving or hearing represent something external to us. And when we do this, whatever this external to us might mean, be it a reality, a tangible reality, or an illusion that for some reason is being cast into our brains, or just a giant hallucination that we might want to study anyways, well, when we decide that let's trust that this represents something external or something more than just thoughts in our conscious field, then we start and we go to layer 2, which is, well, we have thoughts, we can trust reason and logic, and we can also trust that the senses that we have represent something that we can study. And then when we go here, we finally enter the realm of scientific inquiry. Now we finally can use the scientific method. Because in layer 2, since we now trust our senses, we can now trust that whatever we perceive and sense represents something, whatever that something might be, and then we can start using the scientific method to study it, to start poking at it with our tools, our senses, or whatever other tools we might develop, that we still need our senses to interpret. And this is important, because the reason we cannot really use the scientific method in layer 1, where we just trust our reason and logic, is because we could do experiments in the world, but the only way we have to get feedback from those experiments is our senses. I mean, we can use whatever tools we want, a microscope, very advanced tool to look at the stars, but the feedback and the inputs we get from those tools still needs to pass through our senses. We need to see something, hear something, even smell something to know what the results were. And if we don't trust that those represent anything, well, we're stuck on not believing anything that we sense. So we need to be on layer 2 to actually use the scientific method and start exploring the world and using the scientific method and doing all of the things that we normally do when we think and we look at the world and we explore the field that surrounds us that we call reality. So the step from layer 0 to layer 1 is just a jump of faith. We don't really have anything that can take us from layer 0 to layer 1. But from layer 1, we can do the jump to layer 2 using reason, even though it might be not as trustworthy as we would like. So we can, just using reason, get to the conclusion that, well, we perceive things. There are senses, there are things in our conscious fields, there are sounds, there are smells, there are images, and we can decide that we trust them. We can say, well, whatever these things are, I want to study them. Be it because there is an external reality that actually is creating these things in connection with myself and my senses and my capabilities of sensing this reality, or because there is, for some reason, or because something wants it to be like this, there is an illusion that I can perceive, but I can decide to study my illusion as well. I can call, well, illusion is reality for me. I don't really care. There's no difference between a real reality and an illusion reality. Let's just study it anyways and use the scientific method on it. So just by thinking, we can create this tiny ladder to layer 2, even though we can't really say what this reality is or the nature of this reality. There's no way for us to judge whether we are perceiving something that is real, or something that is illusion real, or hallucination real, or whatever it might be. But from layer 1 to layer 2, we have a way. But from layer 0 to layer 1, and consequently to layer 2, we have no tools to escape layer 0. We are stuck. And I do think that this is quite meaningful, because I'm stuck here. Assuming that you are conscious beings that are similar to me, you are stuck in layer 0 as well. So there's this unsureness, which I like to call the permeating unsureness of the universe. There is this unsureness that permeates everything and all the knowledge that we have, because we truly are stuck in layer 0. All of our other knowledge, all of the knowledge from layer 1, layer 2, and whatever more layers we want to create, this knowledge is always constructed on something that is kind of flimsy, because the foundations that we use to escape layer 0, they're not really trustworthy. They're fabricated, they're imagined, they're not really built into something that you can say, yeah, we really can trust this, because there's no because. To create becauses, we need reason and logic, and layer 0 doesn't grant us reason and logic as something we can trust. And I know this can be true. There can be knowledge in reason and logic, and there are reasons to believe that might be true, but again, those reasons are based in reason and logic. And this is very circular. We can use reason and logic to conclude that reason and logic is very trustworthy. We can do this, but we're running on circles. So we are stuck with this unsureness of layer 0. And when I mean we, I mean we conscious beings. And that means me, that means you, whomever you are, and that means all conscious beings that might exist. Unless there is a different way of being conscious that I cannot imagine, and that has some other tools beyond reason and logic, that truly have an inherent seal of true and trustworthy, than any other conscious being, be it a creature, a god, whatever a god might be, or be it an alien or anything. Despite their capabilities and the whatever level of intelligence they might have, whatever they think, whatever they know, has this unsureness that we also have. And I think this is quite fascinating and honestly quite freeing, because it means that whatever we might find, whomever we might find, however powerful, however knowledgeable, however intelligent, is really just as unsure as we are. They don't have a tool that grants them true knowledge, much like we don't have any tool that grants us true knowledge, because intelligence just by itself does not create a guarantee of knowledge. Whatever things we might find, they are just as unsure as we are. Well, this was the first episode of The Critical Wanderer, and I think it touches one of the biggest concerns that we can have, and one of the biggest questions that we might consider and even think about. This: what is known? And I don't have an answer, honestly. My only answer is we're not really sure, and I think that's fine. I hope one day I can make an episode where I say, well, you remember that first episode? Well, it was stupid. We honestly can know, and this is why. But I don't know how that might even be possible, because the "this is why" will depend on reason and logic, and we don't get to depend on that on layer 0. I'm curious about what smarter people than me might think of this, and if perhaps there is a solution that I'm honestly not seeing. And I'm curious because honestly I do hope there is, but at the same time I'm not really confident that there will be. So this was the first episode, and well, I don't have any answers, but I sure as hell have many questions. Thank you so much, and see you on the next episode.